How do manufacturers like General Motors, Volvo, Polestar, and Ford in the future use a 230-year-old law to bypass tariffs on products from China? Well, because the US government allows them to. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John, and we are not talking about the chicken tax today. That old law that puts a 25% tariff on light trucks coming to America. What we're talking today is about literally an over 230-year-old law that allows manufacturers to pay a tariff and then get it back. So what we're talking about is the 1789 Tariff Act, one of the very first laws that our Congress ever passed after our nation formed together under the Constitution. And it put in place tariffs on goods coming to America. But one aspect of it was called the duty drawdown. And this says that if you bring a product here and you destroy it or you export it back, you get the duty you paid back. You get the tariff back, or at least 99% of it. And manufacturers have been using this for, well, centuries now. But the act was modernized in 2016 and adds a substitution clause, which basically says if you bring one here but you export one that was made here, the duty is rebated back to you. Now, I think you can see the power of this, and specifically this comes up for Volvo, Polestar, General Motors, and it should apply to Ford with the new Nautilus. For General Motors, pretty famously, to me anyway, for those of us who are in the auto realm, they build the Buick Envision over in China, and they keep bringing it here, and I've often just thought they paid the 27.5% tariff to China, or on China goods, and moved along with life and just absorbed the difference. But they are using this drawdown to offset those tariffs. And for Volvo, they've got a factory down here in South Carolina where they've been building the S60, and it's dramatically underused. So they're bringing new products there, like the EX90 and the new Polestar 3. They're both going to be brought there. But then Volvo's also introducing that new small sport utility that they're going to be bringing here, built in China. Now, I did a whole video about it. I think it's super cool. I think it's going to be a hit. But I felt they missed the mark because they've got to pay this tariff, number one. That could have reduced the price. And by not building it here and building out the battery infrastructure, they're not going to get the $7,500 tax credit for their buyers. But it turns out I was slightly mistaken here, because they don't have the 27.5% tariff built into it. What they're doing is when that product is built in China and brought here, they have to pay that tariff, but the products they're building in South Carolina are going to be exported. And they can, as long as it's not going to Canada, US, Mexico, to another nation, it offsets that duty. And then I think Ford's certainly going to be doing this with the new Nautilus. They're building this in China as well. They've got exports. They're going to be able to offset against it. And General Motors, just for example, they sell over, last I read, 20,000 full-size SUVs in something like 32 different countries around the world, offsetting any of their China imports. Now, it gets really, really granular when you look at this. What the U.S. has is the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, and this is giving basically everything is given an 8 or a 10-digit code. And so, like, for example, 8703 is automobiles that aren't tractors. And you can really dig into that. And for example, you have a spark ignition engine of a displacement over 3,000 cc's. There is a tariff associated with that. If you import something under that code and export something that would also be under the code, that's where they offset. So, for example, as I understand how this works, you can't import a EV and export a diesel truck, right? It's two different code identifications. So it has to be like for like, essentially. And that's really what Volvo is tapping into, and what I think certainly General Motors and Ford are tapping into. It feels sometimes like a little end around the government, but it's the way the laws are written, and it was written on purpose only in 2016 this way. I'll address in a minute why that is, but one of the things that the Polestar CEO said that I found very interesting is that any manufacturer, cannot build a factory in every single market for every single product they want to build. You've got to have the trade. And so this type of arrangement allows additional products to America, but also it helps build American manufacturing. If we didn't have this, then Volvo and Polestar, which are owned by Geely, which is a Chinese manufacturer, we might only be able to get whatever they happen to build in Sweden over here. But anything they build in China, they just wouldn't bring it here because it'd be 27% more expensive. But this allows us to get additional products, but also encourages them to build that factory outside of Charleston, South Carolina. And while it's got the S60 is what it was building, and I've heard it's only at about 32% capacity, they're bringing in new products. This is investment, this is jobs, this is taxes, it's everything. So it helps build our manufacturing, even if the government isn't getting that 27% tax, or at least they have to refund it back. Now, where it gets more granular is this has been going on for a long time. We're only just now starting to hear about it. We're only just now starting to think about it in terms of full cars. But it applies to almost every single auto part. You can look through this tariff schedule, and McPherson struts are a great example. If you bring one here, but you're exporting from another factory, you can offset your duty. It's windscreens, it's transmissions, it's everything that they can think of. It's all under there. So apparently this has been going on for a long time behind the scenes for auto parts. Just, it's not something we ever thought about. But once you start to look at whole vehicles and the prices those bring, it starts to become a bigger issue. Now, I'll leave the politics of whether you love this or you hate it or not, but the question is, why do we allow it? And I answered it just a minute ago. Because it builds jobs. While we hate to think that this vehicle that I want to buy is being built in China, that's not benefiting Americans, the way this is set up actually encourages additional investment in America, because Chinese companies like BYD, they're huge over there. But they can't export here because they would have that 27.5% tariff slapped on top of their product, and they can't do anything about it because they don't have the manufacturing over here to produce a like product that's going to be exported to other markets. I imagine this is how Tesla also works too, if we get anything from their Chinese factories. But it does open up a question for me. I've thought on this channel for a long time about the Chinese manufacturers. Many people on here think we'll never see them because they build crap, but that's, I think, very short-sighted. They've been getting dramatically better in the past 10 and 20 years. The Korean cars were junk when they first came here. The Japanese cars were first junk when they came here. VinFast from Vietnam. It's not fair to say that the Chinese are never going to get better. I think they are very focused on getting better products out there, and it's working over in Europe. They are meeting the crash standards and everything else and building pretty desirable products. So it's a matter of time until they come here to America. But one of those big hurdles is this large tariff sitting on top of them. They can't just start exporting here and build up a business. Somebody has to make the investment to come over here and build a factory and pray it works. But what if they bought another little company? What if they bought a factory from someone else? I think that's the way Chinese products are going to start coming here under a Chinese brand's name. I think that they're going to be able to go buy a plant and set up. Let me know what you think below, guys. Thanks for being here.